Lots of people making big, big bucks. You and me, babe, I see we're out of love. Well, I heard a voice from a high above. It don't cost a thing just to be in love. We don't have anything but love.
Hi, I'm Gordene MacKenzie.
I'm Nancy Nangeroni.
And this is GenderVision.
We're here to look inside gender with a focus on transgender issues.
Today we have a transgender healthcare expert who's going to join us, Alejandro Marcel, to talk about transgender healthcare issues today.
Yeah, very important issues to the transgender community, but also issues of interest to the broader community. But before we go there, we have a special piece to bring you that I made over the last couple of weeks. There was a segment that aired on Fox News that was very offensive to transgender people. And the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, in partnership with the Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition, issued an action alert calling for a response. Fox News apologized the very next day. And, but I watched the apology, I watched the original segment, and it really, my irritation grew over time. And finally, I just had to do something. And so I made this video. So let's roll that video. We'll show you what we're talking about.
Well, she wants to be America's next top model, but there's a hitch on this one. The she actually used to be he, and I think still is. She tells, or he tells, Us magazine that she identifies herself as a woman born physically male. She told you guys, my cards were dealt differently. Boy, that's an understatement. I got to tell you, she had me fooled when I went to the website. I couldn't pick her out. How about you?
A lot of people fooled, and you know, a lot of these girls, you can't tell what they are. Not exactly like the most high-class group of women. Let's just say that. I mean, let's be polite.
Oh, man. Now, ISIS, and we're looking at her here, him. Ian Drew, editor-at-large, Us Weekly. Way to go. I had fun reading about this in your magazine. Thanks very much. This time yesterday, we aired a segment about a transgender by the name of ISIS. The group GLAD, Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, sent us an email saying it was offensive. That was not our intention. We apologize. That she identifies herself. Boy, that's an understatement. Way to go. I had fun reading about this.
That apology, that's a great piece of work, by the way, Nancy. Best of media literacy, using it to educate around some of the incorrect and inaccurate stereotypes in the media. But, you know, a piece like that, the apology was not really an apology because it did nothing to restore the integrity and the real attitude of civil rights and human rights for transgender people. And it left people thinking that transgender people could be laughed at, poked fun at. What other oppressed group would we really do that to? Yeah,
exactly. And the thing is that by ridiculing transgender people, what happens is, first of all, it hurts ISIS directly. Then there are men out there who are not transgender, who are attracted to transgender. Obviously, it hurts transgender people because ridiculing transgender people makes it harder for transgender people to get jobs and so to be taken seriously and so forth. But also, there's men out there who are attracted to transgender people. And those men, some of those men are very ashamed of that attraction or certainly have mixed feelings about it. And those are the men who panic when they find themselves in a situation of intimacy with a transgender people, oftentimes after the intimacy is completed, after they've had sex, had their orgasm, then the guilt crashes in, and that's when violence happens. That's when transgender people are murdered. So this is the exact kind of thing that makes that violence happen. Now, the apology did not fit the offense that was committed. There's nobody, I think, watching that apology who would be convinced that those two people who hosted that segment, the host and the guest in that segment, I don't think there's anybody watching that apology who would think, oh, they've changed the way they feel about transgender people. Absolutely not. They ridiculed transgender people, and as far as we know, they're going to still be doing that off camera all the time. And so anybody who's uncomfortable with transgender people, who feel or has negative feelings towards transgender people is going to feel reinforced by that ridicule, by that bigotry that was shown. And so that segment really hurts transgender people in the minds of those out there who are questioning or who are already biased against us. Very damaging piece. And so we're going to continue to try to bring you responses to such things here on GenderVision. But it's time now for a break. We'll be back in just a minute with our guest. But first, Raving Raven.
I'm the bird with the word.
Okay, Nancy.
So what do you got for us, Raven?
Well, I'm just going to talk about a little more diversity in the animal world. A long time ago, they believed that all animals were heterosexual, and that was natural.
Sure.
But that was because there was so much homophobia that the researchers were worried about identifying with behavior that wasn't heterosexual in scary times like the McCarthy era, you know, that you humans had. There's at least maybe 40% of the animal species that same-sex pair bonds or has some kind of affectional behavior. And we're not all messed up about it. And we don't throw out our own like humans do.
So there's a lot of homosexuality in nature.
And it's all right. It's natural.
I guess that's a capital N.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a lot of homosexuality, so it's not unnatural.
Sometimes there's mammals that same-sex pair bond, and they help raise each other's young.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Cool.
Red foxes, for example.
Really?
Canadian geese.
So that's like lesbian parenting or gay male parenting.
Some of my very own relatives, crows.
Oh. Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
So there's same-sex parenting in the animal kingdom.
Warthogs.
Well, I don't know if I want to use that example.
Black swans.
Cool.
Killer whales.
Okay.
Okay, Nancy.
Great.
Yeah, and these animals are very loving to their young, and they do affectional behavior. Sometimes they rump rub.
Oh, boy.
Like gorillas.
Cool. So those homosexual animals are affectionate.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Flamingos.
That's cool. Flamingos.
Male flamingos.
Well, aren't they? Ever since the movie Pink Flamingos, I think they've been thought of as, or they've had a special place in the hearts of the gay community, don't you think?
I see lots of them in people's lawns.
Yeah.
I thought they loved birds.
Yeah. I don't know. I think they don't love birds, which is why they put fake birds in their lawns instead of making their yards friendly to wild birds. All right, Raven. Well, thanks. So there's lots of homosexuality in the animal kingdom.
Well, there's just diversity, Nancy.
There is, isn't there?
Yeah, and it's okay. And it would be good if humans didn't get rid of theirs that were diverse. You humans catch up with us animals. Yeah. Everybody belongs. You know?
That's absolutely true. Thanks, Raven. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome back. Today we have in the studio with us Alejandro Marcel. Alejandro Marcel is a diversity educator, a trans health advocate, an independent consultant, and also an immigration rights advocate. Welcome to GenderVision, Alejandro.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's great to have you here, Alejandro. Alejandro is also a member of our crew here at GenderVision. He usually operates one of the cameras, and he also provides consulting behind the scenes. He's also a good friend of ours.
That's right, and he also did the trans health consulting on Gender Talk Radio for a very, very long time. And Alejandro, could you define for us what transgender healthcare issues are?
Transgender healthcare issues vary depending on where the person is at in terms of their process. And some individuals get health care for taking hormones to preparing and getting sex reassignment surgery, or just going in and getting health care for their annual exam and so forth.
So what you're saying is for a transgender person, just regular routine health care is different than for most people. Being transgender, going in just to get a regular checkup can be different.
Yes, because you relate to your body differently than how others see you. So your experience with a physician and a receptionist all the way to the waiting room can have a lot of anxiety-provoking experiences.
So for somebody, for example, who was born with a male anatomy like me, going into a doctor, obviously dressed and living as a woman, but having a male genitalia does create some issues for me. It certainly creates concerns going into a doctor, and as it would for anybody.
Right. What we're facing is the stigma of being a trans person, and having to not only take care of yourself, but also having to advocate for yourself, and that's a lot. That's a lot on one's plate.
And you're advocating because because the doctors...
Usually the physicians are not trained to work with transgender patients.
Okay.
So it's important that the transgender person advocate for their, and educate many times the physician as to how to properly treat them and what kinds of questions that physician needs to be asking that trans person, depending on whether they're on hormones or they've had sex reassignment surgery. All of that falls into the hands of the trans person to do, and that can be very anxiety-provoking because you don't know how the physician is going to react.
Yeah.
And a lot of trans people we know don't get proper health care because they avoid going into general practitioners or any medical practitioners because of the prejudice that they're confronted with and the stigma that you talk about. And that stigma can even start as early as a person coming into the office and being called Mr. or Ms. and incorrect pronouns, which can make someone really uncomfortable and want to flee the office right away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How one is greeted in the reception room makes a big difference. There are other people, other patients there looking at you when you're being called Mr. or
Sure.
Ms. And it's very embarrassing to have a frontline staff that's not sensitive to who you are.
If they're throwing their eyes up or making
Right.
gestures or comments
or even jokes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
So what are some of the so those are issues that all transgender people share in common when they go to the doctor. Are there issues that are specific to male to females versus female to males? Can we talk about those?
Sure.
Of course there are, right?
Absolutely. And this is why we really need to get our doctors on board, because there are really specific situations for both female to male and male to female trans persons. For female to male, 1 out of 4 who are taking testosterone contract ovarian cysts,
Wow.
which untreated can be very serious.
Okay.
So that's 1 out of 4, and that's usually stimulated by the onset of taking testosterone. So and this is for any female who, we all have a little bit of testosterone and estrogen. And any female, whether they're taking testosterone or not, can, if producing too much testosterone in their system, can develop ovarian cysts.
So a spike in testosterone in anyone can
Right.
cause that to form.
And that's certainly something, because a lot of transsexual men are going to take testosterone in order to masculinize themselves.
That's right.
And so they're at risk for these, what is it again, ovarian
cysts.
Ovarian cysts.
I think the case that I'm reminded of that was so profound was the case of Robert Eads, and Kate Davis made a film on Robert Eads' Southern Comfort. And Robert Eads was a trans man who had ovarian cancer, and he went to a number of different gynecologists to try to get exams, and they wouldn't examine him. They said that he wasn't welcome in the gynecologist's office, and he ended up dying of ovarian cancer.
And that's different from ovarian cysts, right?
Yes.
Okay. And
Although they can develop, I think, into cancer.
okay.
Right.
And then there's another kind of cancer, right? There's a cervical cancer.
Yes, there's, you can get cervical cancer, but that's not necessarily 1 out of 4. This is all this all is predicated upon access to health care.
Mm-hmm.
These things can develop into serious things, and access to health care is critical, especially if you're on hormones or looking to have sex reassignment surgery.
And so female to males need to go in and have their pelvic exams and their pap smears to test against
Correct.
for the cysts and cancer.
Correct. And that can be a very disassociating experience if you do not connect with your anatomy as a trans man, and you have to go in for gynecological health care. You can feel very very strange about your body.
Absolutely.
And it really depends upon the doctor. The doctor can make you feel more comfortable if they're sensitive to the fact that you are a trans person,
Yeah.
and to be gentle with you and caring
Yeah.
and respectful.
Yeah.
And that's really the key.
Yeah.
So that makes the exam much more doable for a trans man.
And what about for trans women, for male to female people?
Trans women have to be careful if they're on estrogen as well. They can develop blood clots, especially if they smoke.
So those increase their chances of blood clotting.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I would imagine that it would be really uncomfortable, too, to go into a urologist office and have a prostate exam.
Absolutely. Well, I know that I have to admit, I haven't had a prostate exam in a long time. I don't think I've had one since I transitioned. And just the idea of going into a urologist and asking for a prostate exam, well, I haven't done it. I mean, to me, it's very off-putting, just the whole idea.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather not have a prostate.
Well, what it does is it unsettles the confirmation of what your gender is, because it starts tracking you into the other gender.
Exactly.
And that can be really uncomfortable. So what I hear you saying that sounds really important is that you really need to educate the doctors and the staff to deal with different bodies, gender variant bodies.
Right.
So are there other barriers that transgender people face in accessing health care?
Well, the barriers can be as clear-cut as a physician rejecting to treat you. It's not unusual. I've heard several stories where a trans person has gone into an emergency room setting and has been turned away. That doesn't seem, it's not an aberration for that to happen.
Yeah.
Also, Dallas Denny told a story about her experience where the doctor said to her that she had to have some sutures taken out, and the doctor said, I don't treat people like you. You should go to a vet.
Oh my God.
That's horrible.
Wow. So that's really, so it's, the doctors sometimes can be really terrible.
Absolutely.
And we talked about the waiting room can be difficult and all. Are there like good stuff, and so trans people are right to have some fears around that.
Absolutely.
Well, remember the Tyra Hunter case?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tyra Hunter was in a car accident and was in need of.
And she was badly hurt. She was laying on the pavement, right?
She was
Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
This was in Washington, D.C. There were onlookers, and the emergency team came and refused to treat her because she was a trans woman, and this was witnessed by many people in the community there.
In fact, the crowd was shouting, take care of her. She's a human being.
Right.
And then the EMS was ridiculing her.
And she died.
Yeah.
There was a lawsuit, and the family won that lawsuit. But there are reasons why trans people don't seek health care, and it's because of some of the examples that are given today.
Now, are there studies that exist? Are there good studies, around transgender health care?
The studies tend to be around, they first are initiated through doing studies on HIV and AIDS around transgenders. The government has given grant money to, for example, the University of San Francisco.
Yeah.
And in doing studies around HIV and AIDS, they've been able to glean other information, for example, substance abuse issues, housing issues, employment issues.
What about hormones and the effects of hormone use, stuff like that?
No.
So there aren't any good studies around
Well, they're not in this country, but in other countries where they have a universal health care system, they're able to follow transgender people all the way through as they transition and live. And so what we find is that when going on the internet and looking for longitudinal studies, we find that the best ones come from those areas that have universal health care, because the trans people are coming in.
Those damn socialists.
They are getting health care
and
so forth. And since trans people, one of the biggest challenges we have is employment. That means that
and that's
we don't have access to health care. So.
Before the show, I had gone online and I started looking for some of those studies, and I found some really great stuff coming out of the UK. And you can go ahead and you can download PDFs, and they take you through the whole process, and they let you know not everyone is surgery bound, not everyone is going this way. And they also make it a statement, and they say, this is not a mental disorder, this is not a lifestyle, this is an innate issue that people are working on, and they really have step by step and spell out the different problems. So much more progressive than here.
I always say in my trainings that that this is not a mental health issue. It starts, at a medical level, and without attention and without care, develops mental health issues. In other words,
good point.
If you had a broken leg and doctors refused to treat you and even deny that you have a broken leg, you will develop depression, you will develop disassociation. So
likewise with this. So we start out healthy, but it's the way that it's what we encounter in the world around us that can tend to, it's a significant burden and can tend to drive us to depression.
And in particular, you're also met with being disrespected that really compounds it, or even made fun of, like in the case of Dallas Denny, who's a longtime transgender healthcare advocate in the community. That compounds everything else and makes it much more difficult. How do you learn to advocate for yourself, and what can you do?
Well, a lot of that goes back to self-esteem. Self-esteem provides for you the chutzpah to stand up for yourself in a medical situation. Yeah. To be aware that these people have probably never met a trans person. It may not be on their radar screen, but you're there, you're not invisible, and self-advocate as much as possible. And you probably will have to do some education to your physician, and that's all part of getting your health care. However, it's important to remember that other populations suffer discrimination in the medical environment and also have to do self-advocacy to get their medical needs met as well. So it's really something that it's imperative that we advocate for ourselves. Odds are that when you do that, that physician, when they see the next trans person, will have a better sense of what to do.
And you know what? That's actually, I think, good advice for everybody. You know, our medical profession is in serious trouble, and our medical practices. And anytime you go see a doctor, you are much better off if you advocate for yourself. If you equip yourself with as much knowledge as you can, and you be the director of your fate with that doctor. Don't just blindly take medical advice from anyone. That's the way to get the best kind of health care in this country and with our system.
And if you can't do it, if you're not in the position of doing it, then bring someone with you that can help advocate for you.
That's
right.
a very good point. Yeah. It helps very much, especially when you're coming out to your physician. If you have someone there with you, they tend to feel like you know, there's someone watching, and that you're not alone. Good. And you have someone there that cares for you. They tend to listen to listen more closely.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I've certainly experienced that in going to the doctor since I've been partnered with Gordene versus before. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Is there any place where healthcare providers can go to learn how to better offer? Because there's lots of people out there, well, I mean, some people, we know a lot of doctors go into the business to make money, but we know there's a lot of people going to healthcare because they care about other people.
Well-meaning. And
they want to do right by other people. Is there some place such folks can go to get more information about caring for transgender people? I mean, are there resources you draw on maybe that they could?
Well, the internet has a lot of information.
Sure.
And
are there any sites in particular that are particularly good?
PubMed, Publications Med, is a good place to find any current studies being done.
Oh, good. Okay.
And you just put in transgender.
Yep.
The Journal of Transgender.
International Journal of Transgender.
That's one.
Yep.
They're online, IJT.
Yep. That's a good place to begin to look at studies and essays. And
here in the Boston area, I want to mention that the Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition, masstpc.org, has an excellent resources section that includes references to doctors and to medical care and practitioners and so forth. And so masstpc.org is a good place to go if you're in the Boston area or Massachusetts looking for resources.
And I want to give a shout out to Boston Medical Center here.
Yeah,
it's a great hospital. They have several people on staff, medical providers that are very up to date with trans healthcare issues, and they are a great place to go to.
All right. Alejandro, thanks so much for being our guest on GenderVision.
Thanks for all the work you're doing in this area. It sounds like a lot needs to be done.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I want to remind our viewers that GenderVision is produced by Gender Education and Media, a nonprofit, and we do accept donations. So thank you for your support, those who have given, and we welcome donations. You can find out more at gendervision.org. So that does it for our program.
That's right. Thank you so much for watching, and remember that you too can stretch your gender vision.